All right. Well, it's funny when I asked for the interview, I actually had not read your your essay, "Miracles Ain't What They Used to Be." That provided me all kinds of shit to talk about. So I think this is going to be good, man. All right.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. First, let's talk about your interview that's in that book with Terry Bison. In the interview, you say, "I'm actually not against religion itself, but when people use it to justify bad behavior, or when they show how hypocritical they are, I always wonder if they've read the Bible they love to quote and shake." And also in that essay, you've said that reading the Bible was what cured you of Christianity. Now, I wanted to say, isn't it strange how many so-called Christians don't know what's in the Bible? And also, I think it's funny and telling that most atheists I know are more knowledgeable about the Bible than the Christians are. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. No, I think that's fairly common because I think that's a lot of why we become non-believers. You know, is actually reading it and seeing how similar it is to other mythologies.
Right.
And I think, too, that it's such a cultural element to our country that you would think that people would be aware of it in the same way they should be aware of Huckleberry Finn or something of that nature. So, yeah, that's what cured me. The more you read, the more you see the obvious human failings in the construction and the inconsistencies and the hypocrisy. But I think what amazes me most is just how many people I meet that claim to be Christians who haven't read the Bible, or they are misquoting it, or they're, you know, saying, well, I know this because this is what my preacher tells me, and he's called by God, as if, you know, I can accept that any more than I can accept that my pit bull was called by God.
Right. I do think it's funny, and a lot of people will tell you when they find out you're an atheist, they'll say, well, you just need to read the Bible. Have you read the Bible? And when you tell them, oh, I'm very knowledgeable of the Bible, it makes them uncomfortable. It kind of pisses them off.
It definitely does. And yeah, you know, it's got to be. It's a step beyond that too. It isn't just that a lot of atheists are well read in, say, you know, the Bible, but they're often well read in religion in general.
Right.
Because I think a lot of times is that if you grow up in that, if you have questions, you may even go to the Bible to reinforce what you think to be true, and then realize that it's not true, and that then you begin to reinforce the other viewpoint of it being just part of mythology. And I've always felt that the fact that I grew up reading Greek and Roman and Norse mythology and seeing those similarities, it kind of put me on that track and made me skeptical at first, and then by the time I was, you know, in high school, I was a non-believer.
Right. You know, at what age did you kind of let people know that you were a non-believer, and what was the reaction to that?
It usually just came and you just ask questions. It wasn't so much saying, yeah, I'm a non-believer, but you just say, well, yeah, but if that is true, why? Right. And then you keep getting answers like, you know, well, you know, he moves in mysterious ways, like a bowel movement. And I just thought, well, you know, that's not fulfilling it. But I never thought of calling myself an atheist or not an atheist. But, you know, it certainly was not a common viewpoint where I grew up. And so, you know, but I don't remember ever being afraid to say it or whatever. But I think I was like 18 when I actually realized, you know what, I'm an atheist.
Right. Well, you know, one thing that's
it was there before, but I think that's when I realized it in a concrete kind of way.
Right. Well, I think personally, I tried to deny it for a long time. Like I tried to push it away because, you know, you're basically taught that to question these things is a sin in itself. And
oh yeah, and I did the same thing when I was younger. You know what I think is a unique point of view here is that I started out when I was about 11. I thought, well, I'm going to be a preacher because, you know, my mother was religious, but she was a skeptical religious person, and I don't think my father cared about it one way or the other. He just didn't have any. He told me, once you die, you're meat for the worms, you know. But I don't think he would ever thought of himself as an atheist. He just thought that didn't make any sense to me. And so, you know, I said, well, I'm going to be a preacher. I got to know this Bible backwards and forwards. And I read it, and I went, huh. And so I started having questions, and then I started trying to make excuses for it and loopholes and denying this and that. But just as time went on, and especially as I got older and started getting interested in anthropology and archaeology, and like I said, I was already reading mythological text or stories about Greek and Roman and Norse mythology, and later that expanded to others. That's when it, I finally just couldn't, make any excuses for it anymore.
Well, one thing that always just kind of made me laugh, and I mean, look, I'm not trying to be a dick, but I always find it kind of funny that Christians will talk about other people's religions and kind of mock them for being silly, but they don't seem to notice that their religion does a lot of the exact same things and handles things in the same manner that of the ones that they think are silly.
Well, it's because they're culturally bonded. It's like when you grow up, you can look at wherever you're born, wherever you're raised, you can have some fairly good idea of what that person's religious beliefs are going to be. Not always, but
right.
So if you were born in a Muslim country, then you're very likely to be, of that religious ilk. And the same way, if you're born in certain areas, you're more likely to be a Christian or a Jew or whatever that Hindu, Buddhist. So that unto itself was one of my early suspicions, is that location had a lot to do with what you believed, and that's what I think of and I call cultural bonding. You bond with it to such an extent that you don't question. I even see things. I saw something on the History Channel the other day. No, I think about it. It was a Travel Channel. Think about it. But what they were doing was they were listing, these historical events, and it says, King David did this and so did this. But nobody ever thinks to think, you know what? That isn't history. But it's so built into our consciousness that we believe that these people did these things. And,
right.
And sometimes there's, you can't even find evidence that they exist. Of course, even if you did find evidence that they exist, that doesn't, make them part of a divine plan, nor does, is there anything there that proves religion? But the starting point is there. They can't even, find evidence that the Old Testament people existed, or that, for that matter, Jesus is the kind of a questionable thing too, because
right.
he's mentioned maybe once in Josephus, and that's a suspicious mention. And I think he's mentioned twice in some volumes, which even the Christians doubt. And you can't find this mention of this incredible teacher anywhere else other than in the Bible or in this mention of Josephus, which many people feel was sort of added in. And then even then, he's just mentioned in passing. It's not like there's this great guy. And then you start reading about Apollonius and Simon the magician, and you see how all those things have been just conflated,
Right. One of the things that you talk about is the Apocrypha, which I find I've always had a fascination with. But, most Christians don't even know that exists. And so I was going to ask you for your opinion. Why do you think that most Christians don't know those deleted books of the Bible exist? And if they did know about them, do you think it would make a difference to them at all?
Well, it must make a difference to some, because a lot of us have started out within that religion and believers, and the Apocrypha was one of the things that, also was part of this dismantling of this cultural bonding. But I think that for most people, it wouldn't make a difference, because they have made a commitment to a belief, and they have put their entire lives around it. They have friends that go to church. They go to church. A lot of their life is involved in church. And even though a number of people won't admit it, a lot of people that are, heavy church-going people are more of social Christians than they are theological Christians,
I think
so that's often the case. Well, I think they say about 20% they know of are atheists, but that's the 20% that are saying they are, and there's probably a larger percentage in there that's probably agnostic or atheist is just not saying it,
I had a minister one time tell me, fake it till you make it. Like, if you don't believe it, just pretend. And I always thought that was really weird, and that's common, but I always thought that was really weird because the Bible teaches you that God knows what's in your heart if he exists, and he knows.
That's right. Same argument. Yeah.
So if you are faking it, it wouldn't help. It wouldn't get you anywhere. I just always found that really bizarre.
Yeah. Well, I had a discussion not long ago with somebody. I forget how it came up. I don't go around pulling people's coat sleeve.
No, I don't.
But, with someone who brought it up to me, yeah, I mean, I don't care that you believe those things. I think you have the perfect right to. Somebody said, well, you have to respect my belief. I said, no, I don't. I respect your right to believe it. I don't respect your belief, or I would believe it. But the thing is that he would say, he said, well, I just don't. I just go ahead and decide to believe it because, what if you're wrong? And I said, well, here's the problem with that, and it's the same thing you said biblically that, this person's supposed to, this powerful deity is supposed to know what you're thinking and what you're believing. So that's just a false belief.
Right. It is amazing to me the degree to which people who are otherwise very intelligent people, very discerning people otherwise, will just reject things that are common sense or reject science right out of hand and point at religion as being their reason why. And I find that really scary.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, but there was a time when I was growing up, certainly the 50s and the 60s had a heavy ingrained religion and the anti-Darwinism and all that sort of stuff. But there was also a larger group of people who were willing to say science is science, and religion was left to the church. And there wasn't these things that you put in school where they had religious doubts where they could come in and say, yeah, but maybe creationism exists. And there was none of that. And a lot of that had to do with John Kennedy when he came in and became president, because he was very education and science oriented, as was his wife. Right. And it promoted that heavily. And after the World War II and the atomic bomb, as they called it, that led people to be more aware of things that science knew and that science could do. And even comic books that I read, the old comic book characters like DC characters like Green Lantern and the Flash and all that. Prior to that, most of those characters had their powers through magic. But after World War II, they began to have powers through science because that was the big thing. And so what I'm seeing now is, even though, you had certainly those anti-Darwinist, anti-evolution, anti-science people in the 50s and 60s, but what I'm seeing now is a growth of those people, and they're proud of it. They're ignorant and proud of it, which is the scariest damn thing, because, I knew people growing up that didn't think we went to the moon, and, even my father, who was not an educated man, in fact, he was illiterate for all practical purposes, didn't believe we went to the moon, and there was no convincing them. And I'm thinking, so they spend millions of dollars to go out in the desert and fake it so they can tell us that we did this, and the Russians are in on it too. And, it becomes such a ludicrous thing. But if people can believe that, then, they're going to believe some guy, died and came back to life and went to heaven and, is waiting for you there. And then, I had somebody say, well, I was talking to him. I said, well, God's all powerful. Why didn't he just make everybody perfect to begin with?
Right.
And then I was saying, well, perfection would become boring. I said, the actual definition of perfection is that it's perfect.
Right.
And that it can't become boring because it's perfect. And they said, well, I don't know, but it could be. I said, well, what are you trying to do when you go to heaven? Is heaven perfect? Well, of course. That's what you want, isn't it?
Right.
That's what you're looking for. So you believe perfection when it's time to, but you don't believe it when you don't want to, because it clashes with your basic mythology.
Right. One of the things in that, in your essay that ties in with that, you made the point that has always been my favorite point to make to people, and it's usually the conversation stopper, is that if God is all powerful, why has he never, regrown severed limbs? Why do people that lose their arms and legs in battle when they pray, why do their limbs never, ever, ever, even once in all of history, even in the Bible, have they never been grown back? But at least in the Bible, if you're reading it, that people are cured of blindness immediately. Right. I mean, it's not like they have to go to the doctor and have medicine and recovery time, and then somebody will say, well, I died on the operating table. I said, well, your body quit functioning for a while, but you obviously didn't die. You came back.
Well, it was a miracle. Well, how about all those other people who died? I mean, what's so special about you? You know, why is this happening? And if that's a miracle, why can't they grow arms and legs and missing eyes and, because they get their head blown off, why can't we just set it back on there and pray and then they can get up and walk home? Those are fucking miracles. And I don't want to hear about some goddamn bird singing in a tree being a miracle. It's miraculous in the broader term of that, the broader essence of that term miracle. We can all use that word, but it doesn't have to be theological. It can just merely mean that it's amazing or that it's surprising. I mean, every day I think about, the earth and the universe and, all the things they keep discovering. And to me, that is miraculous in one sense, but it's not what they mean in God's miracles. And in fact, they go to those things immediately when they find they dug a hole too deep to get out. And, by saying that, gee, there's all this miraculous, wonderful stuff in the universe, doesn't prove God, but it proves a certain uniqueness and a wonder. And in the broader sense of nature and the cosmos, yeah, that's miraculous. Right. It's got nothing to do with God. And some people say, well, how can you believe that just happened? I said, well, I don't know how it happened, but to ask me to believe in, this science that I can't explain, these things that go on, doesn't reinforce the idea that there's a God, because in another way, you're asking me to believe, at some level, you're asking me to believe the same sort of thing, that there was a God always here, or there were these forces in effect in nature and the cosmos. Now, which one sounds the most logical? Some invented supernatural deity who's been hanging around that didn't have any better sense than to have to get on Zoloft at some point and become more kind and to decide that there's going to be Christians, so he sends Jesus down. Talk about a convoluted message and a convoluted way of doing it, and it just becomes so, the more you look at it straight-eyed, the more ridiculous it seems. So this is this all-knowing God, so he went through all this rigmarole, where before, from the beginning of time, he had a different plan, and yet he's supposed to know how all this works. Right. And, what happened to all these people before Jesus, if that's supposed to be the Christian's answer? What was their fate? Because they didn't know of Jesus because Jesus had not come down. I mean, you just can keep compounding these questions, and the answers are they're usually non-existent. And what will happen nearly every time when you keep asking these questions, you'll feel them getting back in a corner, and the only thing they say is that you just have to take it on faith. Right. And my take on that has always been, there are people in this world that have absolute faith. The world is flat. Even in this day and age, there are people that have absolute faith in all kinds of other religions and ideas. So I don't have to take it on faith. And to me, that's just a get out of jail free card. That doesn't work for me. If you don't have the answers, then you're not. It's not an ultimate religion if it can't be obvious. Right. If it's supposed to be this ultimate answer, why isn't it obvious?
So much of it makes no sense. And, you also brought up in that essay a point that I've been making for years, and a lot of us have, obviously. But, the situation where there's the guy in the trailer park who survives the tornado and 50 other people die, but he claims he was saved by God. And another example that I would make of this is that, and I've seen this on occasion, is when a Bible, just the Bible, the book, survives a fire or an auto accident in which human lives are taken, and then the saving of the Bible is said to be a miracle. And I find that humorous. And I find it also sick that someone would think that a loving deity would place more importance on a book than he would on the human life.
Yeah, or having his image in a cheese sandwich. Right. I can't seem to explain babies with AIDS or cure that, but you know what? I'm going to put Jesus' face, the Son of God, in a fucking cheese sandwich, and because that's really important. I can always tell me, you believe in God, explain babies with AIDS. I've had some people say, well, they're being punished for what their parents did. So I said, in other words, your God punishes innocent children for what somebody else did. It makes no sense. At least not in not in the way that you're trying to tell me that your God is, that he's all loving and all. I said, you almost have to accept that God's just I think it was Twain said, a malign thug, or a malicious thug. I think he said a malign thug, because that's exactly what you're telling me. And then yet in the next breath, you're telling me God is love and that this is,
right.
All of these things are wonderful. And what we need is more prayer, when every asshole that's got a mouth has been praying from the beginning of this religion for, these things that never happen. Like, if something, they want something and they get it, then God's answered their prayers.
Right.
But God can't seem to figure out how to end wars, get rid of terrible diseases, abuse children, abuse animals. None of that stuff seems to be in his bailiwick. It's more like if you pray for a car and get it, then that is your prayer answered. And if you don't get it, then it's God's will, meaning that he's never wrong.
Right.
There's no way that it matters. Prayer doesn't matter because it just begins to fit whenever you want to decide that it was answered or it was God's will.
Right.
It just makes no sense. It's just conflicting testimony.
Well, and nobody seems to ever take into account the obvious fact that praying works approximately 50% of the time. Like, it works in the same way that everything else works. Some shit happens and some shit doesn't, and they still go, well, it was the prayer, and it's really obvious. It's odd to me that
right. It's just it's another branch of things like numerology and astrology. They're actually all connected in some ways. I mean, even if a person does numerology or astrology is not religious, it's this idea that there's some organized purpose in the cosmos. I mean, I've had people tell me, well, see, my number's number 9. When I got married, there was number 9 in the date I got married, and so on and so on. And I'll say, you know what? If there's 1 through 10, counting to 0, and you've got a lot of chances that those numbers are going to come up.
Right.
And when I say, well, what if they don't come up? Well, what does that mean? Well, what it means is that you're only identifying the moments that came up. You're not identifying the moments that didn't come up. Right. And you're picking the moments when it came up that mattered to you. But you know what? You can find a lot of moments when it came up and nothing important happened.
Right.
It
exactly.
just doesn't mean anything.
Now, I wanted to ask you about the essay that we're talking about here. You obviously say a lot of incendiary things about religion in your essay, and I happen to agree with pretty much all of them. But when you sat down to write that, were you at all concerned about the likelihood that it might cost you some fans?
No, I can't live like that.
Right.
And if people read my books, I think it's pretty obvious that those elements are in the books too.
They are.
I've often had Christians that were good people, and I've had people say, "Why come the Christians are always the bad people?" I said, "You haven't read my work that close. There's some good ones in there." I said, I have a lot of my friends are Christians, and and a lot of the ones that are really live by the basic tenets of really Jesus is nothing but the Beatitudes. And if you live by that, okay, I'm cool,
right.
But when you start using it as some sort of reasoning for hating gays or different people of different religions or people that are of a different race, what have you, then I'm out. I just don't have that belief. And in the last 10, 15 years of my life, I've actually lost a number of friends, not because I'm an atheist, but because they're hypocrites. Right. And they have grown to be stronger and stronger hypocrites, suddenly embracing ideas that they didn't embrace when they were younger. Like, it's just, I don't know what's happened, but it's like there's been a nut door open and all of these nuts are flowing through it. And it's not just religion, because again, like I said, there are a lot of people that are religious that I admire and respect. I mean, Jimmy Carter is one of my favorite Christians because he actually tries to do that stuff.
Right.
And there are other people out there that try to do that stuff. And there are also a lot of people, like I said before, they're social Christians who may not actually even think about really the complications of it.
Right.
But they go to church because it's part of their lives. And then I have some friends that say, I'll tell you the truth, I don't believe there's any afterlife, but I go to church because I really believe in those basic ideas of Jesus. And I say, man, I get it. That's fine. The only problem is a lot of people in your group have a lot more different view of how to interpret those things.
Right.
And my belief is that I can do those things and try to be a good person and a kind person, and without having to accept some mythical zombie.
Right. One of the things that you wrote in your essay that ties right in with this, you wrote, "Truth is, the gun-toting, tough-talking, warmongering Christians I know do not consider Jesus their hero as much as John Wayne. They don't want to turn the other cheek. They want to kill something. If it can't be a human, there's always a deer." And, I share a lot of those views, and I often find myself extremely leery of overly Christian people from the start. I feel bad about that, but I'm curious, if someone you've just met reveals themselves to be a Christian person, do you ever find yourself a little bit guilty of immediate skepticism, or are you able to be objective from the beginning? I mean,
but I'm skeptical in the same way that when I say I'm an atheist, they're skeptical. Right. But on the other hand, that doesn't mean that a lot of those people haven't become good friends of mine. They have, or at least associates and friends. But, I'm always skeptical because religion is always something that tends to let me down, in friends of mine. I'm not, my really close friends and the good folks that embrace the better aspects of it, that's not true. But you have people who start talking about Christianity, and the next thing out of their mouth is something hideous, about gays or black people or Hispanic people or, anybody, you name it, there's a list. And it's not to say that atheists can't be racist and can't be assholes, because they certainly are. I know a few that I wouldn't piss on them if they were on fire,
Right.
So it's just, it's not, I'm not trying to make this point that atheist makes you good. It does not. But it doesn't make you evil. And some people have no idea that atheism isn't like Satan worship or something. They don't even know what it is.
Well,
and the idea that you don't believe is, they just can't embrace it,
I have so many, I don't tell people really, because look, I don't want to get into it if I don't have to, because it doesn't help anybody. Their mind doesn't change, and mine doesn't change. But
sometimes they do. I've actually known a few people in my life that have changed their minds because of discussions that we've had. But I wasn't out to change their minds. They were the people who just started thinking about it and would say, you know what? Where's the answer in this? And but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, no, you're fine. You pretty much covered it. And I'm curious. I've got a question here for you, and it's going to at first sound like it's not related. But it is.
Okay.
It's actually very closely related. As an atheist progressive living in a bright red state of Texas, what are your thoughts on Donald Trump? I mean, it does very much tie in.
I loathe him.
Do you really?
Yeah. Well, I loathe him. I loathe him politically and culturally, but I also loathe him.
Oh, you loathe him? I thought you
related
loved
to
him. I was like, fuck.
Loathe him. Loath. Loathe.
Okay, good.
I know I can't stand the guy. And one of the reasons I can't is this embracing of Christianity and the Christians who have voted for him and put him on a pedestal or decided he can do no wrong, or they say things like, we can forgive, but they can't forgive Hillary Clinton or whoever else they don't like. They only can forgive the person who is a racist jackass and, someone who is an anti-woman, leader. I just don't get it. I don't understand it. I can't understand why they can't see their own hypocrisy, but it's sort of like the water's up to their neck and they still think they're on dry land. They just can't get that, because most of the Christians that I know, and I say this, sadly, and I'm not necessarily saying all of them are this way, but the ones I know are very much in that camp. They're willing to let him do what he wants. They're willing to let him be who he wants. They're willing to accept, pussy grabbing. They're willing to accept all of these things that he's done. They're willing to accept that he won't stand up for women, that he mocks people that were Muslims that had a son that they lost in our military, who was, heroic by all standards, and so on and so on. I mean, the list is endless.
It is.
And I just can't, I just can't, figure it. I don't know what to think. I'm surprised he's lasted this long.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that I knew he was going to be elected, though. I have to say, I wrote an article that came out before the election, and about 4 weeks out, I thought, oh, my God, he's going to win. Not because most people are going to vote for him, but because enough people are going to vote for him. And I knew that they were going to vote in areas where the Democrats had decided not to really put their resources.
Right.
And I remember when they were making fun of him for flying all these little places at the last minute, I said, this is where they're screwing up.
Right.
Because it makes them seem elitist, first of all. Second of all, these are vital areas to the Electoral College. And they're ignoring them. And I said, the guy's going to win. And people say, my friends that were, I guess what you call progressives, you're crazy. You ain't got a chance. Look at the polls. I said, yeah, look at them. They go up and down every day, constantly. They're moving every which way. That means that there are a lot of people that just won't change. There are a lot of people who are lying when they won't admit they're going to vote for the pussy grabber in chief. But
right.
That's exactly what's going to happen, And so when it did, I wasn't surprised. I was shocked, even though I was right, but I wasn't surprised. And I do think that, reckoning should be coming, and I was pretty sure it was, but I've got to where I don't know anymore because there's not a thing he can do that seems to have an impact on that hardcore 30-35%.
No, that doesn't.
Because they're and I hate to say it, but a lot of those people are just plain dedicated to trying to produce this America of the 50s and 60s, which never existed, by the way.
It's ideal.
And what they mean is white. And it's like I was talking to a friend of mine who voted for Trump, and I said, man, how many people on the Democratic side that belong to the KKK and belong to the Aryan Nation and belong to, these Hitler-like organizations have come out in support of Clinton? Well, none. But they have come out in support of your guy. Well, you can't help who votes for him. I said, why do you think they voted for him? Why do you think he got their support and the other one didn't? Or that they weren't some kind of split support? I said, it's obvious what it's about. And some of the people that I know that I never really thought of as racist, I know actually are. Because they really start telling me about how the white people are losing their power. And I thought, you know what, being white has never hurt me a bit. And I come from the poorest backgrounds, and there were black people that were from similar, or probably much worse black backgrounds. And I got opportunities they didn't get, and I guarantee it was their skin color, and from the 50s and the 60s, when I was growing up. So I just get tired of, the whole shit. And I remember one time my wife and I will say this was in the 90s, but we were in a restaurant and we heard two people talking. He said, that affirmative action. He says, I'll tell you the truth, I wouldn't hire any of those, if I didn't have to. And that's when I thought, people keep telling me things are getting better, and they are. There's no doubt about that. But when people tell me affirmative action isn't needed, and I hear people talking like that,
right.
Well, now you're seeing the results of all that. You're having these guys come in that want to say, we don't want to give any special privileges to these people. We want the special privileges. And I certainly believe that as soon as we get to the point where people are hired on the basis of their character and their skills and not their color, we can get rid of that. And maybe we're something closer to it than we once were. But, man, what Trump did, and actually what Obama did, because to people who reacted to him being a black president,
right.
And then to Trump, the reaction to him being president is it's revealed this nasty, deep divide where people are showing what they really believe, and it's scary. It's sad.
It is. And, do you find it frightening to consider that even with everything that's happening in government today, the polling indicates that more Americans would be receptive to a pedophile running for president than they would be an atheist? I think that's kind of crazy. But
it is kind of crazy, And I've had this happen numerous times when they found out I was an atheist, Christian. They said, "My God, I thought you were a Christian. So why did you think that?" Because of the way you act and the way you treat people. And I thought, in other words, I'm doing it because I'm not doing it for a reward. I don't get to, go to heaven and play a harp like I want to, or whatever your vision of it is. So in other words, I'm not doing this for a reward. I'm doing it because I think it's the right thing to do. It's setting a positive example and a positive force in the universe. If you want to do something that has a force, It's your actions and how they're passed on. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to paint myself as some perfect person. I am not.
Right.
So I've done the best I can, but certainly I've made the right and proper effort, you know, and I'm not doing it because I think I'm going to get a reward.